When we think about transformation, I think application or application economy, everybody thinks about application as the way to represent digitization of things. So you build software, and application tends to be the way people think about how you interact with users and how you deliver value. So I think the app economy was all about just like apps in a mobile phone. People think about, hey, I need to create applications. So it's how many apps I develop, how many apps I deploy. But I think when you think about what's the transformation means, it's really in this context, many people will start with transforming means that they are really digitizing things so they can automate the things they have or improve the experience of. If I'm a bank, I walk into bank today or I use an ATM, but that's something physically you have to be there and you have to do that. So if I want to improve that experience, and people create a mobile app, for example, and so that's how the applications start to everybody start thinking about app economy. But now I think when you think about that, it's just about improving the experience of somebody who's just walking into the bank or ATM. But if you really want to transform and change the way you do business, you want to transform to capture many more customers worldwide, for example. And that's sort of, if I'm a bank, how do I get more users? And that's where I think the transformation is going from just using an app, because everybody could have an app. Every bank has an app right now. So what differentiates somebody in terms of, if I'm one bank or another bank, if I rename the change of the logo, there is what we call a digital sameness. So the apps are all the same anymore. I mean, there's no differentiation. So what happens is that's where the transformation is coming in, where we start thinking about true digital transformation means there needs to be a business model change. So instead of an app being the face of the company, people are thinking about, how do I bring my company business value proposition forward, and how do I engage many more customers? So that's where I feel the transformation is, from app economy to more of an API economy. You know, people are looking at more APIs as products. So generally, instead of looking at it as projects, right? People start with everything is a project, which is cost, schedule, and scope type of thing, which has a starting and end. But I think the shift in mindset is really about, you don't do this by starting and stopping things. It's not a project anymore. It's an ongoing thing, because if you want to deliver great customer experience, and if you want to deliver transformance, you're going to be operating 24 by 7, and these are ongoing. It's not a start and end. So that starts with thinking in terms of the products, because you want to have mentality of everything we ship and everything we make available, it's not a project but shifting to product. But then the product itself, how do you measure the success of the product? And that is where people think about outcomes versus outputs, where how do you measure the success of a product for any company? If I'm a bank, if I'm in the business of selling mortgages, and if I want to know how many companies, users I'm getting, and how many people are buying mortgages, but that is at the end result of it. But how do you actually improve the experience from what you're doing? So you look at how long does it take to, for example, do a mortgage today, and what does it happen, like if you have to, in the COVID situation, people have to go and get a bank loan and apply, and it takes weeks, and it takes a while to close a house mortgage. So what if you look at that product is mortgage, but your application and the things what you need to do needs to connect to multiple things? Why is it taking so long? That's because when you want to get apply a mortgage, you need to connect to the different aspects of it. You need to get legal, you need to get title, you need to get your credit history, you need to get. So these are all manual processes, and if you can look at each one as more of a building block as a service, and they're all enabled by APIs, apply and get credit. It goes and does your credit checks, and it gives you approvals within seconds, and you can get a loan, personal loan, within seconds. That's because it's able to connect to all these different things. It gets into your bank, sees what balances you have, what your credit history is, and how much money you're applying for. So it connects to. So that's, I think, is one of the things what people have to do from a DevOps and others, is creating more of those sort of continuous delivery and pipelines, but then thinking about it as microservices,
Mm-hmm.
containerizing them, but exposing those APIs. And that's where you start, because you don't go and have to rebuild everything, but you start with what you have,
Mm-hmm.
enable them as into building blocks and creating more like, what's my product in this case? If I'm just checking credit history about somebody, that's a product. I think especially the large enterprises have been in the business for many years, centuries or years, and this thing. What has happened is there's been a lot of investments in existing technologies. I think we tend to call them legacy, but I think it's a in a city context, you don't you go to New York and just say, okay, I want to rebuild the entire city from scratch, right? It's like these cities are built, they're great companies, just like their cities, but the subway systems are maybe they need upgrading, or they need to have better or faster cars, and improve the infrastructure to some extent. But there is already underneath the city, there are built subways. There is lots of other things that people have done, and so what you want to do is to leverage your existing investments. And for example, I mean, I used to work with, in the mainframe. I used to run the mainframe unit at CA and Broadcom and IBM. Mainframes, came out in the 60s, but they still run most of the world's back-end systems for anything in the banking and financial services. All the payments, every credit card we use today goes through somewhere in the back end, the mainframe. So, but they were built what I call a fit for purpose. What transactional services where they can run 24 by 7 with highest security and integrity. Every time you use a mainframe, you never have a problem. And that's why all the world's largest banks and everybody who payment providers continue to invest in mainframe, because they are actually upgrading to the latest versions of mainframe. But what does mainframe do in the first place? It's a very, very highly transaction oriented system. It still runs. The fastest computers today are mainframes. But do you want to build new mobile apps and other things on mainframe? No. It's the interface is what you want to build, and the interaction with where you want to maybe there. But if you want to connect to any data, and if you look at the dollar clearance for the entire world goes through one bank in US, which has all of $2 or $3 trillion every day, and it goes through mainframe. But the way they do it is they interface that with APIs, and they basically, you never lose that. Even for that system going down for 10 minutes, it shuts down the dollar clearance across the world. So the business impact is what you need to think about. But do I need to go and re-engineer everything and replace something? No. But if you have a new use case, if you have to approach like what I was talking about, Sophie, where you don't need to worry about existing stuff. I'm a new customer. I just need to get started. I need to get everything together in my mobile app, and I need to do insurance more, but it's a completely different use case. Maybe then you build a completely new cloud native application or whatever. But generally, for the bigger the company, they tend to have businesses which are already built on great building blocks of a legacy or whatever technologies they are, leverage them for what they are best at, but then build out the new systems of intelligence, the insights and decision making systems on top of it, right? When you can apply AI and machine learning on top of it to understand things, what it may have, give you tremendous amount of hindsight, because we all learn from history. We are habits of creature. Everything in world they get repeated. So learn from what has happened. So the legacy systems have lots of data and history. You can
Mm-hmm.
use that to get hindsights and insights, and then you can use that with AI machine learning to come up with foresights. And so that's the way you connect to what you have, to where you have been, to where you want to go, and why it happened, where it happened, or all the questions you can answer, because you can bring, just like in a city, it brings that history, and you also build on top of it. So I think the security and compliance challenges are becoming even more important right now. And one other point I'll make is, how do you actually know, uh, what's real or what's fake, right? Whether it's an app or API, because of the fake economy, fake news, and all this stuff. How do people know that I'm dealing with? Because people are using lots and lots of, with the COVID, we all are being bombarded by lots of people coming to you, and is it? It looks like somebody from your own company is asking for information or something which is it's a very difficult sometimes to recognize what's real, what's coming from the company I'm dealing with, or the users. Are they the user fake users, or is a robot who is trying to make up, look like it? So how do I do security and compliance in that context where, is it a fake API or a real API, right? So to me, that's a part of it where we have to be cognizant, and then the exchange of data between the backends and front ends, for example, is it encrypted? People can steal it, or they can improvise. And plus, people personalize information on Facebook, so wherever they find information about you, to use that to create that challenges on the security side. To especially in the context of AI, for example, it takes the data, and it's end of the day the result of whatever the type of data you train the models on is what it would be providing the data and the outputs on. So I use an example of recently with the COVID vaccination. People have different companies, Pfizer, Moderna, and others have a different efficacy, right? Efficacy of, hey, this is 95%, that's 94%, and somebody else is less than this. But then when you actually dig deeper on it, I saw Economist had this thing about, it all comes down to the quality of the data, first of all, because what was the things what they use, like somebody like Pfizer did their trials all in US, and, it's all about, who they, what were populated versus somebody else may have taken some data in South America and Africa and India, and the type of things, efficacy they got was different. But you can't just take, like, let me do the trials in US and now I'm guessing 95% and take it to India or in Africa. Or some, do you want to go with somebody's 95% based on the US population data, apply it everywhere? Is it going to work the same way? Or is it somebody who is less than 95% efficacy, but they have been able to use trials in different parts of the globe to more representative of the world? It is a different thing, right? So that, I think, is one of the questions we all have to ask, is that you can't just take a specific things. How did they train something, or what was the decisions made, or how did you come up with from a business, if you use continuity or whatever. I find that you have to be a lot more context is important, and the quality of the data is very, very important, because it's all about garbage in, garbage out, right? I mean, you basically want to make sure that you're learning from something and some data, and you want to make sure that represents, yeah. Most of our customers, what I find is, they want it to be, we suggest to them, do a POC or do something in your own, take our stuff, we have trained this more from an algorithms and pattern recognition perspective. If I'm using, as an example, AI ops is a very popular area right now, where people apply AI to operations, because you
Mm-hmm.
talked about resiliency and keeping the operations running. Even people are working at home and making sure that systems are running 24 by 7 in a digital economy.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't handle lots of alarms coming in and anomalies, and which ones are important, which ones are not. And so what happens is, AI ops is a way to apply AI to that, to do that. But that, you have to, you can apply AI, and there's a certain algorithms you train, but that anomaly detection may not apply to every scenario, and you may want to make sure that you train it within your context. As an example, I found a customer said that, hey, I'm going to apply your AI ops solution to my environment. It's worked everywhere else, so it should work here. But if you don't take the input of what you're trying to prioritize. As an example, they had some applications which were giving alarms maybe once in a while. That application had an alarm, and but
Mm-hmm.
AI is data was learning based on lots of alarms coming in from some other apps, and it optimized that whole decision making and alarms based on that. And then they found the things what was causing a lot of the alarms was some print server. And print
Mm-hmm.
servers, print servers goes down, what's the impact to the business, versus this one app which was running their, one of the most critical payment service for the company. If it goes down for even 10 minutes, it would cause them millions of dollars of loss. But
Mm-hmm.
from an AI machine learning perspective, anomaly detection was thinking, this is only like 2 or 3 alarms are coming from this app, whereas this print server has got all my print servers down. So it must be the most important thing, because how do you identify the signal from the noise? is very important in that case, right? So you need to be able to understand what's important to the company. The context is important. The quality of the data is important. Otherwise, as I said, now you're keeping all your printers running fantastic in the company, but your main app, which is running the payment system, is down. So that's the problem. What we find is it's the quality of the data, and you want to have context.
10 things is perhaps easy, but governing thousands of those digital assets will become a challenge. So, from your vantage point of view, first of all, what does it mean to you when it comes to governance, and specifically focused on API governance? Let's treat each API as a product. When you have maybe 10 applications, it's easy for you to manage, the entire process of selling, provisioning, maintaining, and all that. But when you have thousands of such digital products, what does governance mean to you? What are some of the basic elements that you see or you would like to advise to your customers that they need to put in place when it comes to API governance?
Yeah, no, I think the governance is kind of a broad topic, but at the end of the day, I feel like it's everything what we do. Did we do? Who did what? What did we do? What we said we'll do? And there are certain. Each company has certain standards in API context, for example. Many people will want to well, you may have security policies. We talked about fake information or meeting. If I'm in a healthcare industry, am I violating the HIPAA, whatever that is? And then being able to uh, kind of look at that. It's not about just technology, because if you are, like, for example, open banking is a big initiative in many big banks, and they're exposing data through APIs, and there are open banking standards, and these things, it's the API governance in this case. Sometimes people think it's like regulatory thing or whatever, but it's not just the. So you want to make sure that people, when they the documentation what people are creating, and then being able to use that, what type of data can I expose? Is it, so as an example, GDPR, people, if they don't understand the, if I just say I need to just expose everything in my company, or if I got a customer and the location information, for example, what are those things which are applicable to GDPR, which are treated as your private information for a citizen of Europe, right? So those are the type of things where the governance needs to incorporate, where you are basically setting boundary conditions, guardrails for people, right? I mean, so you want to, because as you said, there could be thousands of these things going on. You can't be monitoring the governance on an individual basis. So
Mm-hmm.
what are the guardrails? And somebody is kind of making sure. I think about it as you want to be where you're empowering people to do things, so you can take decisions, and you're sharing data, and whatever it's important to do that, because that's the idea. But at the same time, there are some boundary conditions or guardrails you want to be aware of, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you want to know, as I said, I mean, if it is personally identifiable information, that's something which you can't just, if I'm using it even for testing, right? People will say, well, let me just go and test. Guess what? If I'm a payroll processing company, the type of information you get is about the people. It's not just the all the information about it. And then if you know about salaries, or if you know about something else, it could become a big problem in a company. Or if you have a performance related things or company secrets. So I think it's the governance in this context, as people get all caught up in, oh my god, these are rules and regulations I have to follow, and APIs are kind of hard to deal with because you have to follow all the rules. But there are things you can do to say, open up this thing. So you want to make sure that, like Amazon AWS did, every communication between two teams has to go through APIs.
Mm-hmm.
What that means is you are basically, you communicate such that everything you are doing is exposed through APIs. And that is a governance mechanism in a way where, what, any capability or functionality you are developing, it should be exposed at API. The only way other team is going to communicate to you is this API. So
Mm-hmm.
now that becomes a governance. If you don't do that, then they don't talk to you. You can't connect to each other. So that in a composable building block things, you can have a governance more in the context of empowering people and driving the type of behavior you want. Or, at the same time, you don't want to expose some of the company's secrets or some data, personal things or whatever, right? So that I'll make sure that that doesn't get happen. There's some mechanisms built into the process which allows you to, go fast, but you're not being exposed or you're not causing risk. So I think that's really the transformation is really you are trying to move fast and you want to empower people, but you also want to not be creating risk to the business.
Governance point of view, you need the intelligence and automation to manage them as well. Because you, as you said, you do not want to create hurdle in the name of governance and block, the accesses or whatever they are. You want to provide them the seamlessness of what the APIs are supposed to give it to you as a way to digital transformation. But at the same time, for governance purposes, you will have to use, intelligence and the automation to govern them or manage them. So I think I'll just summarize it that way. We are at the top of the hour. Actually, we are running 2 minutes late. So sorry for that. I think it was very, very insightful discussion. I'm sure, I hope you liked it, Ashok. And thank you again for participating in this fireside chat. Any last minute thing you would like to say to our audience?
No, I think thanks for having me here. I mean, it has been a very thoughtful set of discussion questions you asked, and I think these are all relevant to everyone. So I hope people who listen to them even after that this recording find it valuable, and it'll be useful to get some feedback if there is a way to understand what people are seeing there. So I think it's really at the end of the day, you want to truly transform and not just what I call how do you create butterflies in a transformation versus being a faster caterpillar, right? So we all have to think about, are we truly creating value and changing the game, and at the same time protecting the interests of the people who are involved. So that's the balance.
Hey, thank you very much, Ashok. With this note, thank you, audience, for joining us. We'll make the recording available or parts of the recording available.
Cool. Thank you, Ashok. Thanks, Baljeet.
Thank you very much.